So when it comes to elections, we know that election integrity is under attack. We know the other side doesn't play by the rules. We've seen these anomalies for many years. And they because they're not being held accountable, they continue to expand. And we're seeing the activities in other states. I'm sure you've heard the reports, but just of the many reports, the one that stands out for me is the mail truck being lost. Where is it? I mean, there's never been an answer. A trailer filled with ballots from New York, right? To Pennsylvania, and the trailer's just gone. That is one of the many examples of the blatant steps of fraud to undermine the election integrity. But, you know, in Minnesota here, unfortunately, we've been experiencing this for well over a decade. Going back to the Coleman-Franken election, right? Where you have 300 ballots or so just found in the trunk of a car. So what I think is happening is the Democrats have perfected their model of fraud here in Minnesota and are now exporting that model to the other parts of the country. So we're ground zero. And as Representative Drazkowski was speaking about Project Veritas in Minneapolis and Congresswoman Omar, we are ground zero, and we have to continue to fight.
Amen.
So, Representative Drazkowski referenced the district judge here in Minnesota that approved the consent decree. So you had a liberal group represented by a left-wing progressive liberal lawyer sue our left-wing progressive liberal Secretary of State, saying that they want to change the election law.
All is set up.
And instead of fulfilling his responsibility, Secretary of State Simon decided to just agree to the demands and agree to the consent decree that was then approved by the Governor Dayton appointed Democrat, former Amy Klobuchar staffer appointed judge, and she signs off on the consent decree. And they changed election law. And a right expressly reserved to the legislature. And I was one of the slate of 10 electors that would have gone and voted in Electoral College for President Trump in Minnesota. So I was one of the 2 plaintiffs that filed the lawsuit to hopefully end the ballots and the changes they agreed to in the consent decree. And if you remember that, a few days or a few weeks before the election, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in our favor. And they had to segregate the ballots that came in after 8 p.m. on election day from those that were received by 8 p.m. And nevertheless, they still, unfortunately, usurped our elections here in Minnesota. But it doesn't end. And because that judge expressly violated the constitutional requirement that the legislatures change election law, that's why I'm among those that are exploring filing articles of impeachment against this judge. We can't have a judicial... So right now we have an executive branch that chooses not to enforce the law, and now we have some members of the judicial branch are usurping the Constitution, ignoring the Constitution, and just rewriting the law as they deem fit. We can't have that. So in preparation coming up here, on the topic of elections, you know, many of the things that we're fighting for, among them when it comes to elections, is voter ID, right? So most of you probably aren't aware, but what I do for a living is cybersecurity. By the way, I am not being a legislator is not my profession. It's not my career. I have a career in the private sector And I am here making a sacrifice to represent the values and the priorities of those who seek liberty, protecting liberty, and the Constitution. So when it comes to security, right, most of us who use a computer or have to log into a website, we're familiar with having to identify ourselves and authenticate ourselves. And the definition of authentication is proving you are who you claim to be. And we experience this multiple times a day, every day of our lives. This is not a unique concept. Proving you are who you claim to be, right? And so I have just a couple examples here that I was looking up. When you want to pick up certain prescriptions, you need to present an ID to authenticate yourself. If you want to donate blood or plasma, you need to authenticate yourself. If you want to open up a bank account, you need to ID yourself. If you want to apply for unemployment, you need to identify yourself. You cannot buy or sell real estate in Minnesota without authenticating yourself. If you want to rent a car, has anybody tried to rent a car without having a driver's license to prove you are who you claim to be? If you want to go through TSA security at the airport, what do you have to present? ID or passport, right? You have to authenticate yourself. If you want to purchase a firearm to exercise your constitutional liberty, do you have to prove you are who you say you are? Absolutely. How about renting hotels? Anybody tried to rent a hotel without presenting your driver's license? Yeah, you used to before they continued to clamp down on liberty. How about buying a mobile phone or starting a new mobile phone plan? Right? These are just a handful of examples. And yet we try to increase security and authentication in the areas of our election, but you have the Democrats who continue to say that that would be a violation or it would erode people's rights. Well, the fact is, in 2021, we are well used to having to prove we are who we claim to be. And that should be no less a standard for our elections. And that is one of the things that we need to do to bring back the certainty and the confidence that we should and expect to have in our election integrity. So this is just one of the things, voter ID is one of the things I'm going to continue to fight for. But we need to also end this practice of 46 days of early voting, voter harvesting, having same-day registration, vouching, right? Vouching is not in the modern day is not a valid method of authentication. One of the methods that you can use is having a utility, but you can vouch for a person, I think it's up to 10, and you can also present a utility bill with your address on it, right? You know, in computers here, in less than 30 seconds, I could fabricate a utility bill with my name and a fake address on it. But yet, that is something that we use as a standard here in Minnesota to vote. So these are the things that we need to fight for, and we're going to continue to fight for, among the many other constitutional liberties and protections that we need to, again, have and continue on to the next generation. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. And we'll stand shoulder to shoulder as we continue moving forward. Thank you.